You know that neighbor, the one whose grass always looks like it was installed last week, no matter the season? Thick, dark green, no bare patches, no struggle. And you're doing everything right. Watering, mowing, buying the bags of fertilizer from the home improvement store. And it still doesn't look like that. Here's what most people never find out. That neighbor might not be doing more than you. They might just be doing something different, something older. What I'm about to share with you is a fertilizer recipe that costs almost nothing to make, uses ingredients sitting in your kitchen right now, and works by doing something that no store-bought product actually does. It feeds the soil itself, not just the grass. Amish homesteaders have been doing a version of this for generations, and once you understand why it works, you'll wonder why no one ever told you about it sooner. I'm glad you're here. This is Amish Homestead Roots. We bring back the old methods that actually hold up. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, because we have a full season of this kind of content planned. Now let's get into it. Why your lawn never looks the way you want it to. Here's probably the most frustrating part about synthetic fertilizer. And tell me if this sounds familiar. You put down a bag in early spring. The grass goes brilliantly green, you think? Finally. 3 weeks later, it starts to thin again. A month after that, it looks worse than before you treated it. So you apply more, and somewhere along the way you realize you're spending more money every season and getting less result. That cycle has a name. Farmers used to call it flush and crash. You're force-feeding the grass a single nutrient, usually nitrogen, in such a concentrated jolt that the plant responds fast and visible. But the roots never had to work for anything. They stay shallow. And shallow roots are the first to fail in a dry July, the first to get crowded out by weeds, and the first to go brown in an early frost. The deeper issue isn't what's above the ground. It's what's happening, or not happening, in the soil beneath it. Here's something the fertilizer industry won't put on a label. Healthy grass isn't primarily about nutrients poured on from above. It's about what's living in the ground underneath it. There is an entire world beneath your feet, billions of bacteria, fungi, earthworms, and microscopic organisms that work together to break down organic matter and deliver nutrition directly to plant roots in a form the plant can actually absorb. Scientists call this the soil food web. Old farmers just called it good dirt. Synthetic fertilizers don't feed that ecosystem. Most of them actively damage it. The high salt content in commercial fertilizer products kills off microbial life over time. And when that microbial life goes, the soil compacts, drainage gets poor, and your grass becomes completely dependent on external feeding just to survive. You're no longer growing grass, you're maintaining a dependency, and every bag you buy is one more season deeper into it. Now you understand the actual problem, and that's where this recipe changes things. Where this recipe comes from. Before chemical agriculture became the standard, and this happened quickly, mostly after World War II, when companies that had been producing nitrogen for explosives needed a new peacetime market. Before all of that, farmers fed their land with what the land and the kitchen gave back. Nothing was wasted. Every scrap had a purpose. The Amish never stopped doing this. Not because they're resistant to everything modern, but because they operate on a principle that a lot of us have quietly lost. If something works, you don't replace it just because someone's selling you a newer version. Amish pastures and lawns that have never seen a bag of commercial fertilizer are often the most productive, most resilient pieces of land in their counties. Soil scientists who've studied these properties consistently find the same things. Incredibly rich microbial activity, deep earthworm populations, soil that holds moisture and drains at the same time, grass with root systems that go 6, 8, sometimes 10 inches deep instead of the 2 or 3 inches you get from chemically dependent turf. The recipe I'm about to walk you through is a version of what those farmers have been making for a long time. It's been called different things: fermented compost tea, soil drench, living fertilizer. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that it works, it costs almost nothing, and every ingredient is probably already in your house right now. The fertilizer, what it is and why it isn't everywhere. It's called Fermented Kitchen Compost Tea, and before anyone assumes this is just a basic composting video, stay with me. Because what makes this specific recipe different from throwing scraps in a bin is the fermentation process, and more specifically, what fermentation does to the microbial content of the mixture. You're not just rotting ingredients, you're growing something living. Now, I want to address the obvious question. If this works so well, why isn't everyone doing it? Honestly, it's not a conspiracy. It's simpler than that. There's no product to sell, no bag to put on a shelf, no patent to hold. The knowledge exists. It's just not marketed. There's no margin in it for anyone. A lawn care company cannot build a business model around telling you to use your banana peels and coffee grounds. The other reason is that people try it once, don't see a dramatic overnight result, and go back to what the bag promises in bold print. This recipe works differently than synthetic fertilizer. It doesn't create a green spike in 3 days. What it does is build something underneath the surface that makes your grass genuinely stronger over time. That's the trade-off. And for most people who stick with it long enough, it turns out to be a very good one. The 5 ingredients are things you likely already have: banana peels, wood ash, used coffee grounds, fresh grass clippings, and unsulfured molasses. That's it. Nothing exotic, nothing you need to order online, nothing that should cost you more than a couple of dollars, and for most homesteaders, nothing at all, because all of it is already being produced on your property every single week. Understanding each ingredient before you start. I want to spend time on the ingredients themselves before we get to the steps, because understanding why something is in the recipe is what helps you troubleshoot if something doesn't go right. It also helps you adjust if you're missing one thing on a given week. A checklist is less useful than understanding, so let's go through them one by one. Banana peels. These are one of the most underused things in a homesteader's kitchen, and almost everyone throws them away. They're loaded with potassium, one of the 3 primary nutrients plants need, and the one that most commercial fertilizers underdeliver on because it's not as visually dramatic as nitrogen. Nitrogen makes things green fast. Potassium makes things strong over time. Potassium is what builds thick cell walls in grass blades. It's what helps grass retain moisture in its tissue during dry spells. It deepens the green color in a way that lasts, rather than the chemical brightness that fades in 2 weeks. And potassium signals grass roots to grow downward, which means drought resistance. You want 6 to 8 peels for a 5-gallon batch. Ripe or overripe peels work better than fresh ones. The nutrients become more available once the peel has started to break down naturally. Wood ash. If you heat your home with wood or have a fire pit, you have this in abundance. Wood ash provides calcium and potassium, and it has a specific job in this recipe. It gently raises the pH of the mixture and, when applied to soil, counteracts acidity that tends to build up over time, especially in lawns that have received synthetic fertilizers, which are often mildly acidic. Most grasses prefer a soil pH between 6.0 and 7.0. Wood ash nudges acidic soil back into that range, which makes nutrients already in your soil suddenly available to the grass. Think of it like unlocking a door that was always there. You don't need much, half a cup per 5-gallon batch. More is not better, and we'll talk about why in the mistakes section. Used coffee grounds. Coffee grounds are a slow-release nitrogen source. Unlike synthetic nitrogen, which floods the soil all at once and causes that flush and crash effect, the nitrogen in coffee grounds releases gradually as microbial activity breaks it down, which is exactly what we want here. But the bigger benefit in this recipe is what coffee grounds do for earthworm populations. Earthworms are drawn to coffee grounds the way bears are drawn to honey, and earthworms are, without exaggeration, the most efficient soil aerators and nutrient cyclers nature has produced. A lawn with a healthy earthworm population drains better, holds air better, and grows thicker grass almost automatically. Use 2 full cups of used grounds, already brewed, already wet. They integrate better into the liquid and the fermentation picks them up faster. Fresh grass clippings. This is the one that surprises people most. When you mow and bag your clippings, you are removing nutrients from your lawn that the grass just spent weeks drawing up from the soil. Returning those clippings in a liquid fermented form is one of the most efficient things you can do for your turf. Fresh clippings provide a balance of nitrogen, phosphorus, and trace minerals that mirrors almost exactly what your specific grass variety needs, because they literally came from it. It's site-specific nutrition, 2 large handfuls, loosely packed, fresh green clippings from a recent mow. Brown, dry clippings don't ferment as effectively. Unsulfured molasses. This is the activator that turns a bucket of kitchen scraps into something living. Molasses is rich in carbon and simple sugars, and when you add it to water with organic material, it feeds and rapidly multiplies the beneficial bacteria naturally present in those materials. It kickstarts microbial activity within hours instead of waiting weeks for decomposition to begin on its own. The word unsulfured matters here. Sulfured molasses has been treated with sulfur dioxide as a preservative, which does exactly what you don't want. It inhibits bacterial growth. Check the label before you buy. Unsulfured blackstrap molasses is ideal and available in most grocery stores in the baking aisle. 2 tablespoons per 5-gallon batch. Now, 2 quick things people always ask about molasses. First, where do you find it? Most grocery stores carry it in the baking aisle. Grandma's, Brer Rabbit, whatever brand is on the shelf. Just make sure the label says unsulfured. Second, will this attract bugs to your yard? That's a fair concern. Once the liquid is diluted and applied to the soil, the sugar concentration is low enough that it doesn't attract insects the way spilling a soda on your lawn would. You're not sweetening the grass surface. You're feeding underground bacteria that process the sugar before it ever reaches the top. That's what the 48 to 72 hours of fermentation is doing. The sugar gets consumed by microbes during that window, not sitting on your lawn afterward. The step-by-step process. All right, here's the full method from start to finish. Step 1. Fill a clean 5-gallon bucket about 3/4 full with water. If you're on municipal tap water, let it sit uncovered for at least 24 hours before you begin. Chlorine evaporates on its own with air exposure. If you use well water or collected rainwater, you can skip this step entirely. Chlorine will kill the beneficial bacteria you're trying to grow, and this is the single most common reason batches fail silently. Everything looks right, but the water neutralized the culture before it could establish. Step 2. Tear your banana peels into strips. Don't drop them in whole. More surface area means faster breakdown and better extraction into the liquid. Step 3. Add your half cup of wood ash and give the bucket a stir. Step 4. Add 2 cups of used coffee grounds. They'll sink, and that's fine. Step 5. Add 2 large handfuls of fresh grass clippings. Tear or break them up slightly if they're long. Step 6. Add 2 tablespoons of unsulfured molasses. Stir everything together thoroughly. A long wooden stick or old kitchen spoon works perfectly. No special equipment needed. Step 7. Cover the bucket loosely. You want air to circulate because this is an aerobic fermentation, meaning it needs oxygen to develop the right kind of bacteria. A piece of burlap, an old cloth secured with a rubber band, or a loose-fitting lid all work. Do not seal it airtight. Step 8. Set it somewhere warm. Above 60 degrees Fahrenheit is ideal. Let it ferment for 48 to 72 hours, stirring once a day. You'll know it's working when the liquid smells earthy, slightly sweet, and a little funky. Like good compost, not like something went wrong. If it smells sharp, strongly sour, or genuinely foul, it fermented too long or got too warm. We'll cover that in a moment. Step 9. After 48 to 72 hours, strain the liquid. Through an old cloth or fine mesh strainer into a second bucket or directly into a watering can. The solid material left behind goes straight into a compost pile or can be worked into a garden bed. Don't throw it away. Step 10. Apply the liquid to your lawn. Drench the root zone. You want this going into the soil, not sitting on top of the grass blades. Apply in early morning or evening or on an overcast day. This protects the liquid from evaporating and protects the microbial life in it from being damaged by intense direct UV exposure before it can absorb. Apply every 2 to 3 weeks during active growing season. Consistency matters more than volume. What to realistically expect? Here's what I want you to actually anticipate, because I'd rather you be pleasantly surprised than frustrated. If your soil has been treated with synthetic fertilizers for years, the microbial life down there is depleted. One application of compost tea isn't going to reverse that overnight. What you're doing with the first application and the second is restocking that underground ecosystem. You're rebuilding something, and rebuilding takes time. In a lawn with reasonably healthy soil, maybe you've been composting or the area hasn't been heavily chemically treated. You can expect to see a noticeable color deepening within 5 to 7 days and real density improvement in 3 to 4 weeks. In a lawn that's been on synthetic fertilizer for years, it might take 6 to 8 weeks of consistent applications before the shift becomes obvious. That's not a failure. That's what restoration looks like. Either way, try it on one specific section first. Mark the edge with something simple. That comparison will tell you more than anything I can say. Before we go further, a word for the skeptics. Before I move into the mistakes section, and this matters, I want to speak directly to anyone sitting there thinking, this sounds reasonable, but I've tried natural remedies before and got nothing. That's a fair thing to think. The internet is full of lawn advice that sounds logical and does very little. Here's the honest answer. This works, but only if the fermentation actually happens correctly. And that's exactly where most people go wrong without ever realizing it. So the next part isn't filler, it's probably the most practically important thing in this entire video. Let me show you exactly where batches fail so yours doesn't. The mistakes that kill the results. I've heard from people who tried a version of this and got nothing. Zero difference. And almost every time when I ask them to walk me through what they did, it comes down to one of these 6 things. Not because the method doesn't work, but because one small step knocked the whole thing off course. These aren't obscure technical errors. They're easy to miss if nobody tells you to watch for them. Mistake 1. Using chlorinated tap water without letting it sit. This is the most common one. You follow the recipe exactly, but the chlorine in your tap water killed most of the bacterial culture within the first few hours. The liquid still looks right, still smells roughly right, but it's essentially dead water with organic particles floating in it. Always let tap water sit open for 24 hours, or use rainwater, pond water, or well water, and skip the wait. Mistake 2. Sealing the bucket airtight. Aerobic bacteria, the beneficial kind we're growing, need oxygen. An airtight container switches the fermentation to anaerobic, which produces different organisms and can create compounds that harm your lawn rather than help it. Loose cover only. Mistake 3. Fermenting too long, especially in warm weather. In temperatures above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, fermentation moves fast. Past 96 hours in that heat, the mixture can turn, producing ammonia and other compounds that will burn your grass. When in doubt, use the 48-hour mark and smell it. A good batch smells earthy and faintly sweet. A bad batch smells sharp, sour, or putrid. Trust your nose on this one. Mistake 4. Applying to bone-dry, cracked soil. If your lawn is very dry and compacted, the liquid won't penetrate. It'll sheet off the surface and run into the driveway. Give the lawn a light watering about 20 minutes before you apply, just enough to open the soil surface so the mixture can move in. Mistake 5. Too much wood ash. Half a cup is the right amount. If your soil is already slightly alkaline, which is common in parts of the western United States and some regions of the south, adding too much ash can push the pH too high for grass to absorb nutrients efficiently. If you're unsure about your soil's pH, leave the wood ash out of your first batch entirely. You can add it once you've seen how the lawn responds. Mistake 6. Applying in peak midday sun. The UV intensity at midday doesn't just evaporate the liquid, it can damage the microbial life in the mixture before it reaches the root zone. Early morning or evening application gives everything time to move into the soil before the sun gets intense. This is a small thing that makes a real difference. Why this actually works, the simple version. Now that you know how to protect the batch from failing, it helps to understand why this recipe works the way it does. Because when you get this, everything clicks into place and you'll see your lawn differently from here on. Your lawn is a system, and like any system, it only performs as well as all its parts are working together. Above the ground, you see grass. Below the ground, in a healthy lawn, there is an invisible community of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and earthworms. This community is what takes raw organic material and converts it into plant-available nutrition. Grass that is connected to this living system can feed itself, regulate its own moisture, fight off certain diseases, and recover from stress more quickly. Grass that has been chemically maintained in isolation cannot do those things without continued outside intervention. What fermented compost tea does is straightforward. It reintroduces that community of living organisms directly to the root zone. The molasses gives them immediate energy to multiply. The organic materials give them something to work with, and within days of application, those organisms begin rebuilding the food web underneath your lawn. This is why well-managed Amish pastures look the way they do. The soil food web there is intact, uninterrupted, and has been building for generations. The grass doesn't need constant feeding because it's part of a self-sustaining system that feeds itself. That's not mystical. That's just what healthy ground does when we stop disrupting it. Now, I want to be straightforward about one thing. This doesn't eliminate every lawn problem. You may still deal with some bare patches, especially in high traffic areas. Compacted soil near pathways will still need physical aeration, and if you have a serious weed infestation, you'll need to address that separately. What this recipe does is restore the foundation, the underground biology that makes everything else work better over time. Think of it as building a strong base, not a quick fix. I want to say something before we wrap up. There's a version of homesteading content online that makes everything look perfect. Beautiful farms, spotless results, a recipe that works flawlessly the first time. That's not what this channel is about. This is about real methods and realistic results. Your soil might need more time to recover than someone else's. Your grass type might respond faster or slower. You might need to adjust the wood ash based on your region. All of that is normal. All of that is how real farming and real land management work. What I can tell you honestly is that if you stick with this through the first few applications, you will see a difference. Not because I said so, but because you'll see it in the ground in front of you. Try this on one section of your yard. Mark the edge. Come back in 3 to 4 weeks and look at where treated meets untreated. Then come down to the comments and tell me what you saw. I read every single one and I mean that. Your results help everyone else watching this decide whether to try it. If this was useful to you, share it with someone who's been spending money on lawn products and not getting what they paid for. It might be the most practical thing they see this week. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we're putting out something next week that I think will genuinely surprise you. We're covering the one soil amendment that costs nothing, takes 10 minutes, and can measurably improve your vegetable yield before the end of the season. Old knowledge, proven over time. I don't want you to miss it. I'll see you then.